Welcome back to Making Money Matter, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I've got the privilege of talking to Dr. Liz Dallimore. She's the Managing Director and CEO of Argenica Therapeutics. The ASX code is AGN. I had to look down there for a second. Thought I remembered, but I didn't. Anyway, AGN is the ASX code. Now, they're focused on developing products for victims of stroke, traumatic brain injury. They've been around for a little while. And the last time I interviewed Liz, first time on this channel, but the last time I did an interview with Liz was back in about late December of 2021. And at the time, they were doing their phase 1, going into phase 2. It was an exciting time. Now, guys, we're going to unpack some of the value here because back in the day, the market cap was about, I think, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was about 25, 30 mil.
Yeah.
They were really making some inroads. They'd done about a decade into this, their main project with Arge 007. Gotta love that. You can't forget that, can you? Arge 007 is the product that's got so many legs going. It's really, really interesting. Now, at that time, as I said, about 25 mil market cap. Today, as I speak to Liz in June of 2024, they have done some really good work. Market cap is now around about 100 mil. But Liz will explain to you where the shareholder value is coming from next, what they're doing with traumatic brain injury. They've done a placement recently, so I want to unpack all of that. So, Liz, great to see you. Welcome to the first time to Making Money Matter.
Thanks so much for having me, Kerry. It's so nice to chat again after all this time, which went like that, though, to be honest.
It did go like that. Well, now you're on. I'm going to get you back on whenever you've got some news so we can keep our beautiful audience updated. So biotech, a lot of people don't fully understand it. So first of all, just give us a brief overview of who are Argenica, what is it that you're actually doing?
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I think the last time we spoke was December 2021. So we were just a fledgling listed company. We had listed in June 2021. So, and we've come on in leaps and bounds. So we were still a preclinical company, meaning that our lead asset, as you mentioned, Arge 007, hadn't quite sort of hit the clinic yet. And so we'd really IPO'd to get both the cash in and run through into developing the asset into a clinical asset. We are, as you mentioned, a neurology company. We have spun out of the University of Western Australia and the Para Neuroscience Research Institute here in Perth, where I am based. And so we do have the benefit of having over a decade of research work that has been incubated in that university. So one of the things that I really think sets Argenica apart is just the depth of data that we do have on this lead drug candidate. That is predominantly in ischemic stroke, and that is what we're now running a phase 2 clinical trial in. So huge amounts of, I guess, you know, if your thoughts or your sort of audience is thinking as a way to de-risk a drug asset is by looking at how that drug works in animal models. Is it efficacious? Is it actually having an impact on the indication that you are going after? But also, does it look safe so that it doesn't have any adverse effects that you sort of see in those models? And how does the drug work? So we do have the benefit of having all that data behind us as we moved into a phase 1 clinical trial. So we tested the drug in healthy people, so people that volunteer to have the drug administered. We showed that it was safe in those people, and now we're up and running with our phase 2 trial to look at how safe the drug is in stroke patients coming into the emergency department of hospitals across Australia, but also looking to see if it is actually having an effect on reducing brain injury in those patients as well.
When you say phase 1, so phase 1, are you using the drug in healthy patients, and phase 2, you're using the drug of patients that have had a stroke. So you're actually going, all right, it's safe because healthy people, no adverse effects. Now we're going to go into phase 2, which is people going to hospital that have got a stroke. Without going into too much detail, if you like, but what are you doing? Does the drug reduce inflammation? Because inflammation is one of the key issues. with most diseases, in fact.
It is, yeah. So inflammation is a big part of a lot of neurological conditions, but the inflammation in the brain arises because something that happens prior. So if we're talking about stroke, and we're talking about the main type of stroke, an ischemic stroke. So this is caused by a clot in a blood vessel in the brain. So that clot stops blood flow. And the brain needs blood flow because the blood delivers oxygen, nutrients, that sort of thing. So as soon as the brain is deprived of those nutrients, the brain cells start to die. That cell death, then as a secondary result of that cell death, you get that inflammation. So what is really unique about our drug on a global scale, so looking at all the other companies, there's not that many of them, but other companies that are actually in clinical trials in stroke, is that our drug is actually stopping that point of that cell death. So by stopping the brain cells dying, we then obviously you don't get the inflammation that results from that brain cell death. So we're able to stop that progression of brain injury, what we call more upstream. So at that point where you've got that oxygen and blood flow reduction.
That deprivation, which causes so many problems. You said something quite interesting just before, because I was going to ask you about this. How unique is your drug? Because surely, and I think I remember from last time, there was about a decade of research that went into this before you got your hands on it. And I want to understand if other people are doing this, but it sounds to me like you've got a USP, if you like no one else has got that stopping the cell death. Is that where yours is?
Yeah, so yeah, we do. So there's a couple of competitors that are in clinical trials globally. There's not that many. So probably our nearest competitor is a European country that has just recently finished a phase 2 clinical trial, and their drug does work on the inflammation. So the sort of the more downstream effect of that brain injury. And so we do, as a company, and as a sort of a deep sort of scientifically validated company, we do actually take our competitors' drugs, bring them into our lab, so we can make them ourselves, bring them into our lab, and actually test really how they're working. And so we've done that with a number of these competitive drugs in the clinic. And our drug does seem to be the only one that is stopping this cause of the brain injury. So when you have that blood flow reduction, that oxygen reduction in the brain, you get calcium that floods into the brain cells. That is the thing that causes these brain cells to die. So we're blocking that calcium influx. And it does seem to be the only drug out there that has that mechanism, which is really exciting. And I think that's the thing that's kind of now getting the global stroke community pretty excited.
All right, I'm beginning to understand a little bit more, but also, Liz, recently you did a placement. Can you talk to us about the placement, use of funds, and I guess some news flow going forward? Because I guess, are you now fully funded to go through these phase 2 clinical trials?
Exactly, yeah. So we undertook a $12 million placement a couple of months ago. So it was, we really did need to make sure that we were fully funded to finish the phase 2 trial, but have enough money, I guess, in the bank to allow us to continue to sort of progress towards a bigger clinical trial in a phase 3 clinical trial. So it's nice now to be completely fully funded for that phase 2 trial, which is a really big value inflection point, because once we get the data out, it'll tell us, you know, first of all, is that drug safe to administer to stroke patients? That is the biggest hurdle that we need to overcome in terms of the drug approval process. And then looking at how well that drug is actually working on reducing brain injury from that phase 2 clinical trial. So in terms of then the news flow from now until that data readout in the phase 2 trial. So we'll continue to update the market on how well recruitment is going. I should probably point out that the trial is what's called a blinded trial, meaning that we have our drug and we have a placebo.
Oh,
and we won't know whether the patient is receiving the drug or the placebo. So no one in the trial besides a couple of people we'll know which patient has received which, either the drug or the placebo. So 50% of the patients, we're recruiting 92 patients into this trial. 50% will receive our drug and 50% will receive the placebo. So what we will be telling to the market is how recruitment is going, so how many patients we've recruited into the trial, and we will have regular reviews of the safety data, so really looking at that key safety marker that we're looking to pull out of this trial. So that's what we'll report. We'll also be going to the US FDA to open what's known as an investigation new drug application. This will allow us then to go into a larger trial in the US at the back end of this phase 2. But it also allows us to apply for some fast tracking approval for our drug in the clinical trial. So there's a fast track application, breakthrough designation, a number of regulatory incentives we can get from the FDA once we have that IND in place, which will allow us to accelerate the progress of our trial, which is really exciting. And just having that open investigational new drug application gives us the, I guess, the tick of approval from the FDA that, you know, that they view the preclinical data, the safety, the toxicology data as being all sound and of good quality. So that will be some good sort of value inflection milestones coming up in the company as well.
Is that when you sorry to interrupt you, but when you talk FDA, is that the market? Because it's a big market over there. I mean, you're sitting there in Perth. It's an Aussie company. It's listed on the ASX, but is your focus going to be, is that where, I guess, the value add comes from, if you like? I hate to ask, but you know what? I got an investor audience out there that are saying, well, oh, you're focused on patients in Australia, or is it really important? Is that a big hurdle that once you get over that hurdle, this could become enormous?
Yeah, so the biggest market in pharmaceuticals is the US always. So and the reason for that is there's quite sort of attractive drug pricing in the US, but just obviously the quantum of patients that are having strokes in the US is large. So it's definitely our key target market. And so we do need to, the next stage of the trial, which is known as a phase 3 trial, that's sort of the last trial that you do before you get approval of the drug. That will have quite a number of US sites to get that FDA approval going forward for that drug as really the first market that we'll go into. The reason we are doing the phase 2 clinical trial all in Australia is because the FDA recognises clinical trials run in Australia as being high quality, and so they are very happy for you to run your smaller studies only in Australia. It was quicker for us to get those trial sites activated. We have fantastic relationships with the neurologists across these hospitals in Australia. We do have exact same standard of care in stroke in Australia as the US, so it means that we wouldn't have to change anything in our protocol as we go into a trial in the US. And we also in Australia have very good and well-defined consent for patient recruitment into trials. So quite a number, and it's significantly cheaper. Quite a number of reasons why we've done it all in Australia, and it's all good stuff that we can then take to the FDA, which they'll will acknowledge is a well-run trial. So
timing, because how long did phase 1 take? How long do you think? Can you put timeframes around this, or are you going to turn around and say, Kerry, it'll take as long as it takes? But I guess people want to know, because these are milestones, aren't they? They're quite significant milestones in the case of building the company and the shareholder value.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we, you know, and it's interesting what I've sort of been saying to investors is that, you know, I sort of hate to say this in the context of someone having a severe stroke, but, you know, the most important thing in this trial is that it's run well, that it's run thoroughly, and that we are doing an absolutely quality job in terms of looking at the breadth of patients that we're getting in. So it would be remiss of us to, you know, focus the recruitment only on patients in their 90s, you know, who probably won't have great outcomes. So we've been very thoughtful around, you know, the quality of the patients that we're getting in and making sure that they're a good sort of representation of the types of patients that we would have in a phase 3. So that really understanding that recruitment process in the trial is absolutely critical. So we're spending a lot of time focusing on that with the hospitals. But in terms of timing, I've always said we anticipate that the dosing of the patients will take around 18 months.
Okay.
So once that last patient comes in, as I said, 92 patients is what we're recruiting. Once that last patient comes in, then we have a 90-day follow-up. So 18 months of dosing, we'll have that 90-day follow-up, and then we'll do that top-line data look. So we started recruiting patients in March. We came out and told the market when we had that first 5 patients dosed. And so we're now continuing to activate sites. We anticipate that we'll have all sites activated in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Once all those sites are activated, 10 hospitals around Australia, we'll get a better understanding of how that recruitment is going. So every 23 patients that we get into the trial, we review the safety data. And so we'll be reporting to the market what that safety data is. And so the market will start getting a better sense of how well that recruitment's going. But the recruitment's going, it's going really well. So it's definitely, you know, meeting our expectations around that 18 months of dosing. So I'm reasonably comfortable to let the market know that's sort of the time frame.
What is it? And it's a bit of a weird question, but is there something that could completely turn this on its head? In other words, a screeching halt, or are you so far down the track?
Yeah.
I
mean, in looking at sort of where we're at with patient recruitment at the moment and going through sort of what we've seen, we haven't seen. So the thing that would halt a study like this would be a safety concern.
right.
And so we haven't seen anything in regards to that yet. So at this stage, no. So
You're
hopefully
feeling very
it's
confident.
all on
Okay.
track. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you work with the FDA now, even though you're in phase 2? Can you work sort of alongside that so that once phase 2 is finished, phase 3 can pretty much happen straight away? Is that the way it works, or do you have to completely finish phase 2 before you even start anything in talking to the FDA?
Yeah.
Those things done.
Yeah, so we've already gone to the FDA with what's known as a Type B or pre-IND meeting. And that's where we ask the FDA a number of questions just to get comfort, mainly around our clinical trial, our phase 2 clinical trial protocol, to make sure that they were comfortable in terms of the protocol, looking at that safety and toxicology package that we have developed. And so we've already had that first initial engagement. Once we open our IND or investigational new drug application, that's where we'll work more closely with the FDA around our phase 3. So once that's open, we can have that discussion. But once you have an open IND, you can start a clinical trial in the US. So we can go straight into starting that phase 3 clinical trial in the US.
And that phase 3, is that an 18-month process, or is that a much longer process?
No, it can be, because we're running an acute trial. So the trial we believe will be very similar to our phase 2 trial. So the patient comes into emergency department, we dose them, they have a procedure to mechanically remove the clot, and then we have the 90-day follow-up. So it'll be the same. So in theory, it's just a lot more patients that we need, because for statistical significance, we need to have more patients in. And so the limiting factor really is cash. So because we could then activate as many sites as we need, and it could be condensed quicker. We could do it if the more sites we activate, the quicker the trial is going to go, because, you know, unfortunately, there's no shortage of stroke patients.
Yeah.
So really the limiting factor in going into a global phase 3 trial is the number of sites. And so what I'm working on and really focused on, whilst now we've got the phase 2 up and running and it's progressing well, is to talk to as many global pharmaceutical partners around the world as I can to look at potential partnering opportunities for that phase 3 trial.
That was going to be my next question, because on the funding side, and of course, shareholders will be looking at, you know, do you need to do another capital raise? Where, you know, because people will be looking and saying, okay, Argenica Therapeutics, do I jump in now? You've had, by the way, your share price, it hasn't gone parabolic. It's had a very nice steady rise to where I'm talking to you today. As I said, $100 million market cap. I guess what I'm looking for is, when you're looking for a partner, is that when it really gets exciting? And do you feel like, I don't know whether you can answer this question, do you feel like you're undervalued in the stage of growth that you're at?
Yeah, look, so I guess to answer your last question first, we're sort of just hovering around that 100 mil market cap at the moment, which where we are in terms of, you know, the depth of preclinical data that we have, and the stage we are in terms of a phase 2 clinical trial, it's you know, it's definitely on the lower end of the value. The potential upside, obviously, for then getting to like an approved drug, we're talking, you know, a sort of a 10 times multiple, if not more, from here. So if you look at the value of, say, a neuron pharmaceutical neurology company that has one drug on the market, that's a $2.6 billion
okay, that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of upside. Yes, one drug, yes. In an orphan indication, so a sort of smaller indication. So there is a huge upside from here. And the big value, you know, there'll be a big value inflection point, obviously, off the back of that phase 2 data, and we won't be raising money for our phase 2 clinical trial. That phase 2 clinical trial is fully funded. So still significant upside. In terms of a company and looking at the partnering, those discussions have already been initiated, and that sort of partnering opportunity can take all sorts of forms. So where we as a company would run the trial ourselves still, but we would have obviously that cash injection from a partner who would have the right to then take that to marketing approval if that phase 3 is successful. So they're taking on the financial risk, but not the execution risk. Or they may want to take it and run with it themselves, still pay us like an upfront payment, which we then can use to progress, obviously, the other indications that we've got in traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, and we are running out of time, and I did want to talk about that because you have got some other applications. Can you just give us a quick summary? Because this is not just a one drug company, although Arge007 is way down the track, as you said before. There's another company out there got that 2.7 billion. They've only got one product, I guess. You've got some other applications. Just tell us what they are.
Yeah, so we kind of term it as a platform in a product. So we've got the lead drug indication, but the mechanism, the way the drug works, does lend itself to other neurological conditions. So we recently put out some really exciting data around traumatic brain injury in a larger animal model, so a ferret model, where the brain is more similar to humans. And what we're seeing is that our drug has a significant ability to reduce injury to brain cells following a hit to the head.
Oh, wow.
So that work is really exciting. So we've got the more severe traumatic brain injury, our work that we're doing at the moment, that is akin to like a motor vehicle accident, a king hit, Often the types of injuries we unfortunately see in domestic violence cases. And then we are starting to look at an application in concussion as well. So it's having that drug. The drug seems to have a significant impact in not only stopping the injury. So what you have in TBI, you get this diffuse axonal injury. So the injury actually sort of moves through the brain following the hit. So having the ability to sort of stop that and stop the resulting inflammation that you get following a TBI. So that area is really exciting, and we're continuing to work with our collaborators in that area, and with the potential of looking at, what would a clinical trial look like in traumatic brain injury, and talking to a number of clinicians that are very well versed in running these sorts of trials. So that's exciting as well.
Liz, you've come such a long way since I spoke to you back at the end of 21. It's a very exciting time. Thanks so much for coming to chat to us today, because I think I wasn't fully aware of just how many steps you had taken, and really that de-risking from phase 1 to phase 2. It is an exciting time. It's that inflection point. So congratulations on that. As I said right at the start, the ASX code is AGN, ladies and gentlemen. Look, do your own research. Call up Liz, ask her the questions that you want to ask her, send her an email, whatever you want to do, but make sure you do your own research. This is not financial advice. I just thought that this was a pretty exciting time for Argenica at the stage that they're at, and the fact that this is almost that inflection point. But as I said right at the start, when I last spoke to Liz, it was a couple of years ago. They'd only been listed about 6 months. They've taken a lot of steps, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to leave the last word to you, Liz, to say there's 3 reasons. Because remember this, 3 reasons they should. I don't know if you remember this, but 3 reasons to be sitting up and taking notice of AGN right now.
Yeah, look, I think so. One of the things that comes back to me from investors is that we, as a company, we execute on what we say we're going to execute on. So we're very focused as a company to ensure the capital that people entrust in us in a company is actually used well and used right. So we execute well, and we're executing on the delivery of that phase 2 clinical trial, which is a big value inflection point for investors. We've got other things coming through, so fantastic data starting to come through in our other indications, which are huge markets. And we're still, we're still relatively cheap. We have the benefit of only being listed for 3 years, so still a lot more value to come. So if you look at some of the biotechs in the market, the Botanics, the Neurons, the Dimerics that are, having a good run as they're sort of past their phase 3 and into marketing, it's there's a lot of upside. So it's exciting. And as you said, any investors, we've got an investor hub page, so you can put Q&A in there. So if you if you do have any questions, I'm very mindful that some of it can get quite technical, so very happy to answer any questions that any potential shareholders have.
Fantastic. And an investor hub, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, it is great. You can go onto the website. The website is, just remind us again, Liz.
Argenica.com.au.
Easy peasy. You can go there. You can have a look on there. You look for Investor Hub, and you can actually ask questions that will be answered for you. It's a really great product, which is fantastic for communicating from shareholders to the company. So Dr. Liz Dallimore, thanks so much for joining me today on Making Money Matter.
Thanks, Kerry. Thanks for having me.
Don't be a stranger.